Justin, it's holiday time again. The people down here, what can they do to keep themselves busy?
Well, we've got a program which we now call the Sardine Season as opposed to Festival, and we have a campaign that we've entered into in radio, print, and on the internet for 20 major events up and down the coast from Scottsboro to Port Edward and then up into the areas around Harding. But the program is a lot bigger than that. We suggest there are probably about 80 to 90 event days coming up in this particular part of the year. It is normally our second busiest after the summer season. So we are not being shy as far as putting events programs together on beaches or at various clubs, sports clubs, golf clubs, the Dizzy South Coast Raceway, etc. So there's a broad diversity of interests that come into play. It's not just the standard type of event and then people perhaps doesn't fit their interests. So it's covering a large number of our market segments and interests and niches that come into play, be it ecotourism, it'll be activities, sports, etc. So we've adopted that approach so that there's a broader geographic spread of events up and down the coast. And we all know that the economy is in a bit of a state well, not decline, but it's in a very low state at the moment. And we're not being shy on it. We're carrying on and being aggressive and selling the South Coast, particularly for events around the side, because we want to have value adding for the visitor while they're here.
So give us a few highlights in the near future.
Well, certainly we're looking at the golf, we're looking at the fishing competitions that are coming through. There's some MTB series events coming up which we've sponsored. There are 5 major events coming up in the next couple of months in various locations. And as you know, MTB is a very important new leisure activity and sport activity. We've got the maiden ceremony coming up this weekend. We've got Lions Show at Port Edward. Then there's obviously the beach activations up and down the coast, which we do and for the people on the beach. I'm just going through the list here. I mean, here's the advertising that we've done. There's the Portuguese Festival in Port Edward. There's wedding festivals coming up. So as you can see, it's suiting all age groups, genders, races, everything else. So I think we've got a nice mix, and I think by having a nice mix, we're drawing more people, should we say, to come down to the coast. And our campaign, and particularly around the event side, has not been just in KZN, because we're using radio shortly as well. But we've also targeted some of the major radio stations up in Gauteng, which is approximately 40 to 50% of our business down the south coast.
The question is, how many people are here?
The events, when they are done, that we get a closeout report from each event, and they indicate to us how many people attended, whether they were local or whether they were from outside the area. And then we also do a snapshot survey as well amongst our members to see what the response is. And those give us an interesting indicator which we update after every holiday season, in fact.
Any idea now of the occupancy rate in the B&Bs and so forth?
They're varying. I mean, some of them are quite low, and I think that's understandable in this part. I think it generally picks up over the season as well. And others are pretty high into the 70s, 80s, 90s. But generally over this time of year, if we get an average between 65 and 70%, I think we're doing okay.
What about the people who are pessimistic, saying that this coast is dying vis-a-vis the north coast? That more and more people will be going there.
Well, the recent stats from TKZN said we're still outperforming the north coast in terms of domestic tourism market. The facts are out there; they speak for themselves. And if you make a comparison, particularly if we're talking events today, a comparison between ourselves and north of Durban, we outstrip them in terms of event days by a long way. And I think families are quite discerning. They say, if there's more for my kid to do or my family to do, then I'm going to come back time and time again. And it's all good and well having what I call peak type of events, which, should we say, give it a bit of a blast, but you've got to make consideration of, should we say, smaller events with a greater geographic spread to benefit everybody in the destination. So we numerically are outperforming the north coast. And also in terms of number of events, we after Durban are probably the second highest in the province.
The sardines. The sardines, this time of the year, they're supposed to be here, but they're not. And they haven't been for 4 years. Isn't that a problem? Yeah. We're doing it. But, what are the prospects of the sardines arriving?
Well, I'm not an oceanographic expert, but we read the reports every day, and there have been sightings down in the Wild Coast, albeit rather small. Last year we did have a few landings, but not huge amount of fish came through. I hope that the fisheries part of government will start paying very serious attention to the importance of the Wild Coast and the South Coast marine protected areas, and monitoring perhaps illegal fishing that comes into that area. That might be one of the reasons why they're not there. And it's a climatic situation, ocean temperatures, winds, currents, etc. So it's still early days. But from our point of view, almost equated to seeing the northern lights in Scandinavia. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. You go to a game reserve, you might not see a leopard. So we always hold thumbs, because if they do come through, it's a fantastic natural phenomenon. It equates to the migrations on the Serengeti in Tanzania. So certainly if they come, then obviously it's a major boost and people want to come down and see this. In fact, I've only seen it twice in my whole life. So, when I was living in Durban, and when we saw it, it was fantastic. So we hold thumbs on it, as do most people. But yeah, the frequency of them is determined by so many different factors.
Just lastly, I mean, isn't it a problem? I mean, it's one of the major tourism points, and it doesn't happen. So the greatest show on earth. Doesn't it make it difficult for tourism to promote if it doesn't, if, they just not come?
Not necessarily. I think we've got a lot of backup elements to this time of the year, particularly the weather, and once again, the event calendars, and the fact that the hospitality industry has very good value for money. So we use the sardine season, as it were, as an umbrella term, but with such diversity of options and experiences that people can have, I think people buy into it. Oyster Festival, if you look at Knysna, for example, I mean, I don't think they have a huge oyster industry, but nevertheless, they're using that as a tagline for which people come through. So it's a way of us coupling a lot of different elements to it, and I think the ultimate seller, in fact, is the climatic, this mid-year break, and so close to our key markets. So we'll keep it going. You never know if the tourism sector says, let's try and reinvent something over this time of year, we'll consider it.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thanks a lot.